Throughout the years, there have been a lot of ups and downs with WB and DC Comics video games. From Injustice to the Batman Arkham series, it's definitely clear that some of the subsidiaries of WB definitely can put out some pretty good games. However, it seems that Rocksteady is definitely one of their more consistent subsidiaries. When it comes to the Arkham games, those are definitely some of the most highly rated Batman games and DC comic games in general, some calling the first Batman Arkham games some of the best superhero games ever made. But then you have things even from Rocksteady like Batman VR. So, what makes a good Batman game, and why are some of these games based on the Batman universe so dogshit and others so fantastic? Well, that's what we're going to be exploring today. We're exploring what makes a good Batman game and what WB can do going forward to put out better content. Now, because there are so many WB games and DC Comics inspired games to choose from, I'm going to narrow it down right here at the start, and we're just going to be talking about the Batman Arkham series. And I also want to mention that there is another big distinction for these games. There are two developers that put out games within the Arkham series, that being WB Montreal and Rocksteady. Now, WB Montreal has only put out two games in the series, that being Arkham Origins as well as the Arkham Knights game that recently dropped. While Rocksteady is definitely the more main developer and has put out the more critically acclaimed titles within the Batman Arkham series. Now, I'm also not really going to be touching much on the iOS or Android games, as I haven't played those, I haven't seen much information about them, and so I can't honestly talk about them that openly and honestly. So, the only games that we're really going to be touching is Batman Arkham Asylum, Batman Arkham City, and Batman Arkham Origins. Beyond that, I will touch on the VR game, Batman Arkham Knights, and the upcoming Suicide Squad game. So let's go ahead and get into it. One of the main things I remember being so big about Batman Arkham Asylum was that it really felt like you could be Batman. Overall, the first time I saw this game, I was in Walmart and they had the PlayStation demo up, and I remember this kid who was about 4 years older than me was playing it and said, "Holy crap, it really feels like you're Batman. It really feels like you can beat people's asses and be a true detective." And when I got my hands on it myself, it definitely did feel that way. You really feel like your punches have some power behind them, and it always had me asking, is Batman murdering these people? Because some of these people I don't think could survive some of these blows. That, alongside them making the voice acting fantastic, as well as the characters feel like they have a bit of depth to them, made the first Batman game in the Arkham series just that much more enjoyable. And it was really fun to see how they brought forth all of these villains in a world that you could interact with, and getting to fight against the Joker was such a cool thing to be able to do. Now take that and add it to the fact that Batman Arkham Asylum was just a really fun game, and you can see why it became so popular. For once, we actually got that gritty, edgy comic book feel that really seems like it's necessary when we talk about characters like Batman, and so for all these reasons, that game was a giant hit. And it didn't take long for Rocksteady Studios to follow up their great game with another project just 2 years later, that being Batman Arkham City. This game took the best elements of the first game and took it and put it in an open world environment. It also felt really cool feeling like you were actually Batman, sticking to the shadows of the city, going around and finding people to save and villains to fight. They maintained the ability to either travel via stealth or go loud, and then that really allowed for variation in gameplay depending on the style that you wanted to use. We also had cool things like his ability to glide and the grappling hook that allowed you to go into higher up areas and really explore the whole city. And they increased the complexity of the overall combat system, now allowing people to block multiple blows simultaneously and catch projectiles, attack aerially, and all sorts of other stuff that really made it feel very fluid. Also, all of the Batsuit upgrades were really cool. You had Catwoman in there. There was just a lot to keep the player busy. And again, they took the original game's best elements and upped it, adding more ways to utilize them and adding different gameplay mechanics and styles. Also, this game had a lot of content in it. There was 40 hours of gameplay, 25 hours of main story missions, and 15 hours of side missions. So there was, again, just quite a lot for the player to do, really making it feel like the city had a life of its own. Then we come to Arkham Origins, the first Arkham game that wasn't created by Rocksteady. And according to everybody, this is where everything seemingly starts to go wrong. When Rocksteady was too busy developing the Arkham City game, WB wanted to have another game in the works that can come out shortly after, and so they moved that work over to WB Montreal. Montreal didn't really make much of an increase on the overall mechanics of Arkham City, and instead had just a different story with pretty much the same gameplay mechanics. On top of that, the story was very disheveled. It seems that the story was way too wide-reaching and overall tried to cover too much at once, leaving there to be a lot of continuity errors, including entire subplots that just go to the wayside. One of the main ones I can think of being that there are assassins that are out to kill Batman at the beginning of the game, and by the end of it, that's just all but forgotten. Now, don't get me wrong, there were a lot of new ideas and implications placed into the game of Arkham Origins. However, most of them felt really unnecessary and didn't really feel like they added to the game. For example, the free flow combat had a slight improvement by adding combos momentum, giving you XP points that you can then use on upgrades. But this felt mildly unnecessary and pretty much just like another thing that they could throw onto the screen. The world also felt unnecessarily large. A lot of these side missions just felt like busy work, and one other thing that they added, for example, was detective vision, where you would investigate various crime scenes throughout the various areas in the game, and various holograms or lit up items would give you more information about the crime that took place. Now, this pretty much got rid of a lot of the puzzle elements of the detective aspects of these games. It felt more like a story being told to you rather than a game being played, which was a big issue. And there was also a multiplayer mode in the game, which felt really unnecessary. I didn't play it much myself, but overall, from what I can tell, it seems like a more run-down version of the overall game, meant to kind of fill people's times once they've finished the overarching game. But with all of the bullshit side missions and shit thrown into this game, I honestly don't know if anybody ever even really played the multiplayer. And honestly, instead of focusing on an overall multiplayer aspect, it would have been better to put more time into the detective vision maybe and find out ways that you can integrate more intricate puzzles within them, or other ways that you can move forward the overall game and combat. And this is where we really start seeing things go wrong for the Arkham series. When we see studios start focusing on using different technologies or trying to reach too wide with the overall plots being told in their games, we see that the games become less character focused, less story intensive, less overall innovation, and we see that the games just really lose their focus. Another great example of this is the Arkham VR game. I'm not gonna lie, I actually managed to play a little bit of the VR game in 2018 because I went to like an Airbnb that just happened to have like a PlayStation VR, and they had that as one of the games, and my god, was it terribly boring. Overall, it felt less like a game and more like a visual storyteller that's meant to be told in VR. This is another place that we see more of a focus on using a new technology rather than focusing on how that technology is actually used. And now we're going to talk about the more weird game in the series, Batman Arkham Knight, and then we'll go ahead and get into Gotham Knights. Arkham Knight is definitely one of the weirder ones in the catalog because it basically gave the gamers what they wanted in some ways while confusing them deeply in others. For example, the Batmobile was added here and overall is a completely brand new style added to the game. It makes it feel completely different, but in actually sometimes the worst of ways. There's a battle mode that you can utilize in it that just doesn't feel right, and the Batmobile feels so overpowered through the whole game, it takes away most of the fun of the combat. Also, the game is actually pretty stretched thin when it comes to story, considering we get a brand new villain that never existed for Batman before, as well as a large ensemble cast of various villains through Batman's past. But in some ways, the game became more character-centered via the Joker's introduction and how he's utilized. The Joker in this game has already died and is basically haunting Batman's memories. Especially the end of the game is really trippy and has a lot to say about a game and the studio that really doesn't know what else to do, especially when gamers keep pushing for more and more. So, while some of the new aspects of it, like the Batmobile's battle mode, were really just not good, we did get a better, more story-driven and focused game. And I would say that that's an improvement, actually. Now, those are my only real critiques and positives that I'm gonna give about Batman Arkham Knight. I want you guys to tell me in the comments below, did you think that this game was a good addition to the series? Do you think that there were things they could have changed? And if so, what were those specific things? Okay, now let's get to the final 2 points to discuss here, the Gotham Knights game as well as the upcoming Suicide Squad game. Gotham Knights was the most recent release from this overall series, and what it did is it took the overall Batman story and focused on the sidekick characters that everybody knows. And in this game, we hit some of the same snags that we've hit before. Overall, the game has a very wide cast, and that doesn't allow for any specific characters to feel deep enough to actually get connected to. Also, it feels like they don't actually play up each individual unique's abilities. More, it feels like they use a similar combat system. And when you have so many different characters, this starts to feel a little repetitive, especially with the enemies that are being fought. This issue is made even more clear through the loot system in the game and how grindy the overall game feels, really emphasizing repetitive gameplay, which is honestly pretty strange considering most of the time grindy gameplay is meant to increase the odds of a person buying microtransactions, but there were no microtransactions in this game. It almost feels like at the last moment everybody made a big stink and then they said, no, pull the microtransactions now. And this definitely makes me worried about the Suicide Squad game that is coming out soon, especially knowing what we know now, that it's going to focus on a multiplayer aspect, that you always have to be online to play, and that there is apparently a battle pass system. So now that we've discussed what made the best games in the Arkham series and what has made some of the worst aspects, let me wrap it all up nicely for you. WB, and particularly I suppose Rocksteady, when they're making games in regards to the Arkham series, should try to focus on a more story-driven and character-centric game, while also attempting to take the best parts of the comics and bring them to life in a way that feels real and feels new. And also do all of this while trying to focus on new gameplay mechanics and aspects without trying to use new technology without a purpose. Please, for the love of God, stop focusing on multiplayer for these games. It feels super unnecessary and overall feels like just a way to get more money out of more people. So, that is all the critiques that I have for the Batman Arkham series. What did you guys think of this video? video, as well as what are your takes on the overall Arkham series. What's your favorite games in the series, which ones are your least favorite, and what do you think that WB and Rocksteady could do going forward to make a better, superior game? I'm definitely looking forward to see what you guys have to say in the comments below. You can follow our Twitter and Instagram, that'll pop up during the outro, as well as all of our other socials are down in the description. So I will see you all in the next gaming session.
I spaced out of my head to the depths of the universe. It's a spell or a chance just to open up a new world.